All right, welcome back. Today we are continuing our RBT exam practice question series. This is where I go through practice questions for the RBT exam and I walk you through them step by step, how I think about them as a BCBA and how I think you should think about them when you're taking your actual RBT exam. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're coming back to study, continue working hard. It's going to pay off, I promise. If you need our study materials, please check out our website, rbtexamreview.com, or our shop, gumroad.com/rbtexamreview. You can also go directly to our study materials using these links, which I'll put in the comments and descriptions below. We feature 2 practice exams, a full-length RBT study guide. Our combo pack comes with everything and the flashcards. It's our best deal. And we now have a competency study guide as well for both that initial and that renewal. So keep learning, keep working hard. Super proud of you guys. When you do pass, please let me know so I can include you in our Sunday shout out videos. Other than that, keep studying hard. Keep the comments and questions coming. Email me, leave them below. Happy to help. Okay, let's get into it. Question 1, your client's mom reports that your client has started to cover their ears in certain social situations. Which of the following would be the best way to determine why the behavior is happening? All right, pretty common scenario. As you're working as an RBT, new behaviors are going to come up. Your client will report them to you, and then you will report them to your BCBA or your supervisor. And when you report them to your supervisor, typically the first question they'll ask you is, well, why is the behavior happening? What is the function? Okay, because in all treatment of behavior, we start with the function. The function is why that behavior occurs. What is the question asking you? The question is asking you, which of these answer choices would be the best way to determine why the behavior is happening, or how are we going to determine the function? Okay, so A, interview the parents and the siblings, ask specific questions about antecedents and consequences. B, interview the client, ask them why they cover their ears. C, analyze the data with your BCBA and hypothesize a function. Or D, observe a social outing with the client and mom and take descriptive data. Okay, kind of a tricky question because all of these are ways to analyze a case, right? All of these are relevant to behavior assessments, okay, and understanding more about our behavior, okay? But the question, like all questions on the RBT exam, what's the best way, okay? So what can we eliminate? Well, let's eliminate A and B, okay? Because interviews, right, are the weakest way to determine why behavior is happening. And that's because you're not actually observing anything. You're just asking questions. When you're asking questions to parents and siblings, okay, bias comes into play. They might lie, they might misremember, okay? When you're asking the client, okay, the client might just not tell you the truth, but they might not tell you anything, right? Interviews are the weakest way to determine function, okay? See, analyze the data. 1, this is a brand new behavior, so we probably don't have data yet, okay? 2, again, when we're analyzing the data, we're not actually observing the behavior. The only answer choice where we're actually observing directly the behavior is D. Observe a social outing with the client and mom, take descriptive data. The best way to determine a function, okay, is to actually observe the behavior occurring, okay, whether through a functional analysis, right, or a direct functional behavior assessment. The answer choice is D. John is working with an 8-year-old client. The client will throw trash on the ground instead of putting it in the trash. The client's dad requests that the client learn the difference between putting things in the trash and throwing them on the ground. What would be the best way to teach this skill? Okay, warning, this is a very tricky question. It's going to require some thought, okay? So let's look at it. We have a client who throws trash on the ground, okay, instead of putting it in the trash. We want them to learn to put things in the trash and not throw them on the ground. Immediately, what do you think of? You should think of differential reinforcement, right? What does differential reinforcement teach? It teaches discrimination, okay? It teaches differentiation. And that's what we're looking for here, right? We want them to throw trash in the trash and not throw it on the ground, right? This is classic differential reinforcement. And we are teaching this skill, okay? This is a new skill. So what's the best way to do that? A, provide reinforcement to the client for throwing items away in the trash. in reinforcement for not throwing things on the ground. Okay, what's wrong with A? Well, think about differential reinforcement. What is the definition of differential reinforcement? In differential reinforcement, you reinforce one behavior and put other behaviors on extinction. What are we doing in this scenario? Well, we're reinforcing everything, right? How are they ever going to discriminate when they receive reinforcement for throwing items in the trash and then not throwing things on the ground, right? It's not specific enough, okay? We're looking for specifically throwing these items in the trash, okay? Not just not throwing them on the ground, okay? Differential reinforcement is reinforcing a behavior and putting other things on extinction, okay? A isn't specific enough. B, provide reinforcement to the client for throwing items away in the trash and remove a token when the client throws things on the ground. All right, so we're actually using a punishment procedure in B. Okay, this is response cost. You're taking away something to try to reduce behavior. However, okay, one, we never jump directly to punishment. Two, we don't know if removing a token is going to function as a punisher. And then three, in differential reinforcement, okay, we use extinction, right? Reinforce one, extinction for another, okay? So B is out. C, provide reinforcements to the client continuously for throwing items away in the trash and only when he throws items in the trash. All right, this is pretty good, right? The only time our client is getting reinforcement is when he throws items away in the trash, okay? And we're giving it to him continuously, okay? So on an FR1, this is perfect, right? This is how we teach a skill, right? You continuously reinforce the skill you want to teach, okay? We're teaching this behavior, okay? We're providing reinforcement every time it happens. C is great. Always read all your answer choices. D, provide reinforcement intermittently to the client for throwing items in the trash and only when he throws items in the trash. Okay, looks just like C, but one big difference. What's the big difference? Our reinforcement schedule. When we provide reinforcement intermittently, okay, that means we're providing it not every time, right? It could be an FR3, a VR4. Intermittent reinforcement is great for strengthening, maintaining, right? However, we want to teach. And when we're teaching a skill, we should use continuous reinforcement. That's the best way to teach a skill. The best answer here is C. This is a hard question, a very hard question, one that requires a lot of thought, okay? Go back, read the question, okay? Think about differential reinforcement. This is a great way to understand differential reinforcement, where we're reinforcing our target behavior, okay, and only our target behavior, all right? So the answer here is C. Your client struggles completing activities. Your BCBA asks you to record how many turns the client takes during a board game without getting out of their seat. What measurement procedure would you use? All right, after that last question, this one should be a walk in the park, right? Really, really easy. There's a dead giveaway in this question for the answer. And what is that dead giveaway? Okay. The dead giveaway is how many, right? How many turns? Okay. So we know we're not using duration, okay, because we're not measuring time, right? And then IRT and latency, right? We're not measuring the time between two behaviors or the time between an SD and a response. We're just simply measuring how many times the client takes turns. We're counting how many times they take their turn. The answer is what? Frequency. Okay, this is a good teaching moment from that last question to this question, okay? That last question might take you, a minute, minute and a half. It's more challenging. This question should take you 15 seconds, 20 seconds, okay? When you utilize your time like that, okay, and you answer the easy questions quickly, it gives you more time on the more difficult questions. And that should be your goal, okay? The questions answer quickly and get through them, okay? If you don't know an answer to a question, don't be afraid to skip it and come back to it, okay? Easy questions you have to do quickly, right? And you can do them quickly if you study your terms, if you do your definitions. People often after using our materials and studying hard, okay, have 30, 45 minutes left on the exam. Now that shouldn't be your goal, right? But it is possible. The point is, Easy questions should be easy, and you should do them quickly to give you more time on the harder questions. All right, continuing. Whenever Bill takes away his son's iPad, his son screams until Bill gives the iPad back and says, okay, one more minute. Bill wants this behavior to stop, so an extinction procedure is implemented. However, Bill reports that the screaming has only gotten louder and for longer durations. What is the most likely explanation? All right, again, pretty simple, right? Pretty straightforward question if you've been studying. What are we doing here, right? Bill takes away the iPad, son screams, Bill gives back the iPad, reinforces the screaming behavior, screaming continues. So we say, okay, we're going to put the behavior on extinction. We implement the extinction procedure, and that behavior, screaming behavior, only gets louder, more intense, more magnitude, and for longer. What's the likely explanation? A, the client is resisting punishment. Well, did we talk about punishment at all in the question? No. Extinction is not a punishment procedure, therefore it can't be A. B, the client is resisting extinction. Is the client resisting extinction, right? Is that really a thing? No, we don't have any evidence that extinction isn't working, right? It's actually the opposite. We have some pretty good evidence that extinction is working as intended, okay? C, the client is experiencing an extinction burst. Yes, right? What is an extinction burst? An extinction burst is a temporary increase in the frequency and magnitude of behavior when extinction is implemented. And that's exactly what's happening here, okay? Extinction in this case would be Bill takes away the iPad, son screams, Bill does not give the iPad back. Extinction burst is screaming gets louder, louder, louder. And then eventually that screaming is going to go down, right? As we teach a replacement behavior. Classic example of an extinction burst. C is our answer. Always read your answer choices. D, extinction is not working. Again, the opposite, right? We have really good evidence that our extinction is effective. We can plan for extinction burst. We expect extinction burst, okay? Therefore, this is not surprising, right? We should be prepared. Our answer is C. You are close friends with your supervising BCBA and work on several cases with them. Yesterday, your BCBA called you and asked that you work on a new case. The case involves a mutual friend whose son was just diagnosed with autism. How should you respond? Okay, ethics question. Remember our rule for ethics question, okay? We want an answer that is common sense, that is strong, right? But not too strong and not too weak, okay? You need that perfect balance. In this scenario, your BCBA calls you and say, hey, I have a new case, right? It's one of our friends. Their son was diagnosed with autism. I want you to work on the case. How should you respond? A, accept the case and maintain professional boundaries. B, accept the case, but ask that a different BCBA work on the case to avoid conflicts of interest. C, reject the case and report your BCBA for accepting a client that they know personally. Or D, reject the case to avoid any conflicts of interest. Okay, so A is out, right? And then B is out. Why? Well, this person is also a friend of yours, okay? So you can't accept this case, right? You know the person, maybe you even know their son, all right? You can't accept cases where you have a personal relationship with the mom or the client, okay? It's not allowed according to our ethical codes. So A is definitely out, right? Now, what about B? B would be okay if you didn't know the person, right? If it was just the BCBA's friend and you had no idea who the person was, you could accept the case and have a different BCBA work on the case. But since you know the person and you potentially know the son, you have to reject the case. So do you reject the case and report the BCBA, or do you just reject the case? Well, you just need to simply reject the case to avoid conflicts of interest. Again, C is too strong, right? The BCBA is allowed to accept clients at the company that they know personally, as long as they're not involved with the case, right? It's perfectly acceptable. So C is too strong. D is perfect, right? Reject the case, avoid conflicts of interest, no big deal. Our answer here is D. You and a group of friends decide to take a road trip to Las Vegas for a week. You load up the car and hit the road. 3 hours into the trip, your gas gauge reads empty. You see a sign for a Chevron with gas prices. So you pull in to pump your gas and then get back on the road. What is the SD for pumping gas in this scenario? All right, straightforward RBT exam question, right? They want to know, what is our SD? Okay, we have a scenario. You need to identify the parts of the scenario. The best way to do this, in my opinion, okay, is to identify all parts of the scenario using our ABC, right? What is our antecedent? What is our behavior? What is our consequence? Okay, so what is our behavior, right? We pull in the pump gas, okay? Consequence is we get back on the road. So what is our SD? What comes right before pumping gas? Well, you see a sign for Chevron with gas prices, okay? So that's our SD. That is the easiest way to do these questions. Now, if we want to get more technical, right? What does the sign for Chevron actually do? Okay. What is an SD? An SD is a discriminative stimuli. It signals reinforcement is available, right? Seeing your gas gauge empty is motivation to get gas. It's our MO. But does seeing your gas gauge empty automatically say, okay, now gas is available? No. Think about when you've been driving on the road and you're on empty and you can't find a gas station, right? That little bit of panic. The motivation starts to increase more and more, okay, the longer you go on empty. But until you see a gas station, there's no reinforcement available and there's no SD. In this scenario, our gas gauge reading empty is our MO. The sign for Chevron is the SD because it signals, hey, gas is available here, reinforcement is available here. Pulling in to pump the gas is a behavior, getting back on the road is a consequence. The SD for pumping gas is the Chevron sign, okay? So go back, re-listen to my explanation, right? If you don't understand how we got there, okay? This is a very simple MO-SD behavior consequence question, okay? Very basic. Once you understand this question, now you're on the way to really starting to understand ABA and its principles, okay? All right, RBTs must receive routine supervision and retake the competency assessment to remain in good standing with the BACB board. How often must RBTs retake their competency assessment? All right, so you might get some questions like this on the exam where they ask you about your qualifications, you know, how do you maintain good standing, that type of thing. They might ask you, when do you get supervision? How often do you get supervision? How much supervision do you need, etc. Okay. I want to make sure you're aware of how you maintain good standing with the board. So you don't just pass your exam and then a year out, right? You forget to do all of this. Okay. So one of the requirements is you retake that competency assessment. Okay. How often? How often do you need to retake the competency? So you take your initial, right, before you take your exam. You pass your RBT exam. How long until you take it again? Is it every 6 months, every year, every 2 years, or every 5 years? Well, the answer is annually, every year. That's how often you renew your RBT application, okay, which involves fees and your competency assessment and some other things, okay? But every year you need to redo your competency assessment with the BCBA and ideally 45 days before your renewal is up. Okay, so these questions you just kind of have to understand and know, right? There's no trick to the supervision questions and the requirements. You just kind of have to know them, right? You have to know that you need 5% supervision and that every year you take your competency, that kind of thing. Okay, all you can do there is just memorize it and know it. All right, so every year you must retake your competency assessment. Every Saturday, Jane attends social group with her peers. You're there working as an RBT on Jane's case. Jane's goals are to initiate interactions with peers and maintain conversations with peers. You notice Jane walk up to a peer and say, "Hi, I'm Jane." You get excited and immediately praise Jane. Jane now refuses to walk up to peers and introduce herself. In this scenario, praise functioned as what? All right, so good example here, right? You have the best of intentions, right? You know the targets. You want to reinforce your client for executing or evoking or exhibiting those behaviors. Okay, so you see Jane walk up, They initiate an interaction with peers. You get pumped and you try to reinforce. However, Jane now stops going up to peers. Okay, so what happened? All right, this is a reinforcement punishment question. So how do we start with these? Let's ask ourselves, did the behavior increase or did the behavior decrease? Well, our behavior decreased, right? Jane now refuses to go up and introduce herself. So our behavior is decreased. Therefore, we know it's a what? It's a punishment. Okay. So what type of punishment? Are we adding something or are we taking something away? Well, what did you do? You praised Jane. You added praise, right? Therefore, this is what? Positive punishment. Okay. That's how you should walk through reinforcement punishment questions. Did the behavior increase or decrease? Did we add or remove? Okay. So a good example here of how what we typically think of as reinforcement doesn't always function as reinforcement, right? We think praise is great. Kids love praise. They love attention, blah, blah, blah. Not every kid, especially in social situations, is praise really the best way to go. Okay. In this case, it actually functioned as a punisher. And now Jane won't walk up to peers. Okay. So you have to be careful. You have to understand what actually functions as reinforcers for your client and what actually functions as punishment for your client. Okay. And then execute. Okay. In this scenario, praise functioned as what? Positive punishment. You help your BCBA conduct a reinforcer assessment for a new client. However, the only item that was determined to act as a reinforcer was M&Ms. What would be the best way to establish new reinforcers for your client? Okay, this isn't uncommon. A lot of times our clients, especially if you're working with kids with autism, they can have restrictive and narrow interest, right? And so we might only have one or two reinforcers that we can use. And when you only have one or two reinforcers, you run the risk of satiation and them getting tired of it and overexposure. Okay. So what's the best way to get new reinforcers? Okay. At least you have one to start with. What should you do? Should you A, pair the M&Ms with other items? B, conduct reinforcer assessments until you find something else that works as a reinforcer? C, use a list of items that children enjoy playing that you found online? And D, use reinforcers that work with your other clients. All right, what's wrong with C and D? Well, C, just because you find a list of items that children enjoy playing with doesn't mean that your client's going to enjoy playing with them, okay? Every case is unique. Every client is unique. We need new reinforcers, new preference assessments, new behavior plans for all our clients, okay? Not saying that what works for one case won't work for another, but we need to determine that, okay, empirically with the use of assessments and things like that. Using a list of items is not empirical, okay? C is out. And then D, same idea, right? Just because your other client loves Tonka trucks doesn't mean this client even cares about trucks, right? So D is out. That leaves us with A and B. B, conduct reinforcer assessment until you find something else. This is just brute force, right? You've already done the reinforcer assessment, okay? You can try again, but just doing them over and over, okay, is just kind of a waste of time. The quickest way to establish new reinforcers is to pair the known reinforcer with other items, okay? You take the known reinforcer and then you condition other items, okay, to be reinforcers. That's the best way to establish new reinforcers from known reinforcers, okay? The answer here is A. Your BCBA calls you into their office to discuss a complaint from a parent. The BCBA tells you that the parent loves having you on the team, but they don't understand any of your explanations when you tell them about the session and client's progress. What might be the problem? All right, so this is you're getting feedback, okay, but they're not asking specifically about the feedback. They're asking, why do you think your parent doesn't understand when you tell them about session? What might you be doing wrong? A, there hasn't been enough parent training from the BCBA. Well, maybe, okay, but we can't assume that if your parent is talking about your explanations, okay? We're not talking about the BCBA's explanation or the implementation. We're talking about your explanations to the parent and about progress, okay? So we can't assume A. We don't know enough to assume A. A is out. B, the client isn't listening closely enough. Never blame the client. That goes for the parents and the kid. Okay. If the kid isn't learning, we never say it's the kid's fault. We adjust. Same with the parent. Never blame the client. Okay. B is out. D, it was probably a simple misunderstanding. Well, if they're reporting it to you or to the BCBA, this might have been a recurring thing, right? If they love having you on the team, we know you've been there a while, right? So just being a simple misunderstanding doesn't seem to be the case. D would be a decent answer, okay, if we didn't have C. And that's why you need to read all your answer choices. C, you're using too much technical language in your explanations. C is our best answer. It fits the task list and it fits the parent's explanation, okay? You explain to them session and client's progress, but you might use a bunch of jargon and technical language, which you aren't supposed to do. When talking with parents, you want to talk to them in a way that they will understand. Use as little jargon and as little technical language as possible. Our answer here is C. All right, that is our conclusion today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. Check out the study materials, okay? Any questions, comments, please email me. Please leave them below. I'm happy to help. When you do pass, let us know so we can include you in our shout out video. Other than that, keep studying hard, okay? It's going to pay off, I promise. And I will see you Friday.